Well, big news out of China, just in time for China to stop the military drills that they began around House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit. Now, for the first time in over 2 decades, China has released a new white paper on Taiwan that lays out their goal for the island, saying that they want to have a peaceful reunification, and they are calling this one country, two systems.
Yeah, here's the white paper. I have it here on my screen, and then we can go through some of the details here. But this is a really stunning, this is the first time they've released a white paper since the year 2000, right? Which details...
That's not the paper.
Oh, okay.
I will get that for you if you want to pull it up on your screen. You continue.
Okay. So this is the first time in a number of years, 2 decades, that they've issued a white paper on this, the idea of reunification through peaceful means, that you will get to basically keep your autonomy in many ways, but China will be reunified in the way that it's always been and will continue to be. So here's some of what they had to say in this reunification language. The document says, "We will work with the greatest sincerity and exert our utmost efforts to achieve peaceful reunification, but we will not renounce the use of force, and we reserve the option of taking all necessary measures. This is to guard against external interference and all separatist activities. In no way does it target our fellow Chinese in Taiwan. Use of force will be the last resort, taken under compelling circumstances. We will only be forced to take drastic measures to respond to the provocation of separatist elements or external forces should they ever cross our red lines." Perhaps that's the most important sentence of all of that.
Sure. So pointing out separatists, right? Who do you think that is? The document nowhere mentions NATO, but it does come on the heels of NATO saying they would like to name Taiwan a sort of, what is the language they used it, like unofficial best friend, right? Something like that. That's not it at all. But it was along those lines, that we want them to basically be our friends in that region. And we are willing to legitimize, well, the United States is now saying we're willing to legitimize the Taiwanese consulate that's in Washington, D.C. So obviously China, referring to these separatists, is referring to the West. Now they're saying they will not rule out military force if we can't come to a peaceful agreement with Taiwan, but they will not target fellow Chinese in Taiwan. Now, that's basically everybody, right? Because they consider people who live in Taiwan Chinese. So they're saying, we're not going to be aiming this fire at Taiwan. So
well, I want to
where
know
then?
I want to know what the timeline on all of this is. Like, here's what we suggest, and here's what will happen. And so there's not like a countdown timer, like, like here, we're going to give you this option for a length of time.
It didn't come across at all like a legal demand letter, right?
Right.
Make this right by this day or else. It's like, look, and they said they released this with sort of heartfelt intention, that they really want Taiwan to think on this, think about how, and they lay out all kinds of economic reasons that Taiwan should formally join China. Now, I'm not saying I have a dog in this fight at all, but it's interesting that it is very much a lay down your weapons and lay it out on paper, right?
I was going to say, wouldn't the separatists, I think that's targeted more towards people in Taiwan that wish to be independent of China, where external forces would be more geared towards the NATO and the U.S., because aren't separatists usually people within a region that want to be separate from that region? Yeah,
that's the way that I read it too. That's my take too. Was it Pedro in our chat? Because we are live. Yes, we are live. Pedro in our chat says, didn't they make the same promises to Hong Kong?
Yes, and they actually mention Hong Kong in the paper, saying, we learned some lessons that way. There's some anti-China sentiment in Hong Kong that's preventing this from being smooth, and we're ready to do this better. So that is a good point, and they're one step ahead of you on that one.
Yeah. So again, the independence forces and the paper directly address U.S. intervention in Taiwan. Some forces in the United States are making every effort to incite groups inside Taiwan to stir up trouble and use Taiwan as a pawn against China. So they don't pull any punches here. They go on to say, If the U.S. intervention is left unchecked, it will continue to escalate tension across the straits, further disrupt U.S.-China relations, and severely damage the interest of the United States itself. The paper goes on to call for more cross-Taiwan Strait communication and says China wants to work with a one country, two systems arrangement with Taiwan, referring to the governing systems of Hong Kong and Macau. We will continue working with our compatriots in Taiwan to explore a two-system solution. But they come back a number of times to talk about U.S. intervention in the islands and stirring up trouble. And we won't tolerate it, and we will respond militarily if this continues.
They also say national reunification is the only way to avoid the risk of Taiwan being invaded and occupied again by foreign countries. They mentioned the 50-year occupation by Japan and how, not having reunified with Taiwan already is a humiliation. And they said in order to foil the attempts of external forces to contain China and safeguard the sovereignty and security and development interests of our country. Now, as soon as this paper was released yesterday, Western media did not give Western news consumers very much nuance on it. Reuters' headline was, Taiwan rejects it. That's it, moving on. And I mean, I really was sort of shocked by how little context Westerners are getting, because of course this is more nuanced than just, no thank you, China.
Were you really shocked at this point? I mean, you know how the Western media is horrible on this issue. The Western media is all in on Taiwan.
Sure.
They're continuing to push BS stories about Uyghur genocide. They're continuing to push this narrative. And
sure.
So they absolutely want this to happen. They're pushing, and they've been pushing for war, by the way.
Yes.
It's great for newspapers. They've been pushing for war. A number of newspapers have been pushing for a U.S. war with China for a number of years. Opinion writers, you've had people like Thomas Friedman pushing for this, and then comes back and says after Nancy Pelosi's visit, that was stupid. So you have some little concessions, and that's why we call them out. Occasionally you have like an opinion piece in the New York Times that we're like shocked. The Thomas Friedman in the New York Times actually said that this Nancy Pelosi trip was ridiculous and stupid and utterly reckless. And we call it out because it's so rare.
Yes.
These Western media outlets.
But some are saying since the first white paper with this intention was published in 1993, the second one in 2000. So now we're over 20 years since that proposal. This is a very detailed update to that plan, right? And so for Taiwan to just say, no thanks, right? No world leader would sort of reject that out of pocket if they were earnest about protecting their people. It, at the very least, is nuanced enough to require some discussion.
And Miles Ross in our chat brings up a good point, says many Taiwanese people do not want U.S. interference.
Yes.
Yes, and that is highly underreported. In fact, when we were covering the Nancy Pelosi visit, we were showing you protest videos. Some of those protest videos were calling her, an evil witch and get off of our island. We don't want you here. You're creating discontent. You're creating problems. Leave now. Those were being pushed and suppressed on social media. Those videos were being kicked off of social media. So of course they don't want you to see those videos. They want you to think that everything is hunky dory. And Nancy Pelosi flies into Taiwan and she's greeted with roses.
As that CNN clip we showed with Roger Waters, because the U.S. has a role as liberators, right?
Right.
I'll never get over it. I'll never not use that as an example of just hyperbole.
Well, Michael Smerconish said that.
Yes.
And Roger Waters called it out. Yeah.
Right.
Meanwhile, we're learning more about Nancy Pelosi's 24-hour visit to Taiwan. You remember the one, first of all, you remember this trip. I don't know if you remember this trip or not, but it's the one that cost taxpayers $90 million 2 weeks ago. Just to bring you up to speed, to give you some context on this story, we report, it is summer after all, and so many people are on vacation and enjoying time with the family. So I understand if you missed some of this news, I'll bring you up to speed. We reported that the government of Taiwan, since 2018, in these leaked documents that came out this week, has paid Nancy Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi's campaign over $3 million, as revealed in these documents here on your screen. And it goes through line by line, showing all sorts of different Taiwanese government offices that were sending money to Nancy Pelosi. We also learned that she tried to keep this portions of this trip private. In fact, the whole trip, and then then once it was revealed, a huge chunk of the trip was also kept private, that while Pelosi was there, she met with chip manufacturers at TSMC, which is Taiwan Semiconductor. And this comes as we learned that her husband just made huge investments in the chip manufacturing companies that would directly benefit from these relationships. Like, how convenient. You can just get to go and check on your investments by flying on taxpayer dollars into Taiwan. Then Nancy Pelosi was asked whether this trip was worth it the other day. And of course, she came out and said, yes, it was totally worth it. It was absolutely totally worth it.
For her.
For her. I mean, I cannot see, or maybe the military industrial complex, like her chip manufacturers in the military industrial complex, like they really scored big with this trip. She said it was totally worth it. And then, as if by a miracle, just a few days later, Congress approves over roughly around $300 billion for chip manufacturers, and President Biden signs it into law. It's the CHIPS bill, the CHIPS funding bill. $280 billion, but it's even higher than that if you calculate some of the other subsidies involved in this thing. And the more details about this trip, though, are emerging over the past 24 hours. She didn't disclose that the taxpayers were also paying for her son to go on this trip. How many people knew that? That Paul Pelosi Jr. flew into Taiwan with her, and she didn't disclose this information.
Oh, mother-son trip. I like those.
So there he is, encircled in red on the right side of your screen. He was caught in photos at this meeting. These are meetings with, and there he is again in the green in the back, meeting with Taiwan Semiconductor and other government officials. So this information leaked out about this. She didn't disclose it. It was not disclosed in her trip logs. And it was only discussed later. Now, Taiwan Semiconductor. So if you want to know how the Pelosi family is doing and making bank on this, TSMC is the 9th largest company in the world with a market cap of almost $500 billion. Okay, so if we could put this up on the screen. They currently are planning to build a brand new $12 billion facility in Arizona. And according to Taiwan media, they discussed how the new $280 billion CHIPS Act would benefit Taiwan Semiconductor. So that was part of the meeting. And her son was there.
Okay.
You know, that's crazy to me because it's like she's enriched herself. She has become a 100 millionaire while she's been in office. Mm-hmm. So we paid for her trip, basically $90 million for her to go negotiate a deal to come back and make even more money. And she made $3 million in order to get the deal in the first place. So It's like this woman's making money hand over fist and just treating our money like it's her personal checkbook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's most of Congress, by the way. So,
yes.
We're picking out her specifically, but how many
but
members
it's allowed,
of Congress?
right? Like because the Congress writes the rules of what's allowed for them. I mean, they sort of made this perfunctory law saying that they need to disclose more. The disclosure in congressional, it's like they're still writing rules that benefit themselves.
And what's interesting too is, like, we talk about this Arizona plant for TSMC. Back in 2020, Washington subsidized the construction of this. So 2 years ago, under the Trump administration, actually, $12 billion for this plant in Arizona. So the U.S. government foot the bill, and this is Taiwan Semiconductor's stock price. You can see and how well they're doing right now. Up nicely, of course, on this CHIPS Act news. It is one of the 3 top companies in that report that I just had up on the screen that Motley Fool, the stock trading analyst company, says will benefit the most from this CHIPS Act. Number 1 being Intel, number 2 being Taiwan Semiconductor. And so this Arizona plant was already subsidized by the government. So this is above that. You taxpayers funded them to build a plant in Arizona, and then Nancy Pelosi goes there to shore up more deals with them on the backs of this $280 billion CHIPS Act in Taiwan.
Well, and think about this too. So, and then they just passed a bill, or getting ready to pass a bill, because they're not getting enough of our money. They've got to come after us and get even more so they can be more inefficient and buy more stupid shit with our money.
Right. Yeah, the IRS getting $87,000. I was going through some of the IRS, the job postings for these.
Yeah.
Where, you're going to work at least 50 hours a week. You will be on call nights, weekends, holidays. You will have to carry a firearm with you, and you will have to go through firearms training. and be prepared to use deadly force. That was literally the job postings for these new IRS agents.
Because you're going to be showing, I mean, go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to say 69% of those 87,000 employees are for enforcement.
Although some are saying that it is due to attrition, right? Because working for the IRS is a slog, apparently. And as Commissioner Reddick had said in his hearing just a few months ago, they've lost 27,000 or 17,000 agents because who wants to do that, right? Even if you're a really good accountant, you probably want to work in the private sector. So maybe those are entry-level jobs and you do it for a while and you're just like, I can't take it. I'm abusing everyday Americans. And now I have to go after them with guns if they don't let me in for an audit. Like, no thanks. Most people won't want that job.
Yeah.
Well, you'd have to find people that love that system. Like you would have to somewhat like the IRS system in order to work for it, wouldn't you? Like I would think.
Well, maybe, but the IRS probably is a pretty solid job with good benefits, government hours, I mean, there are people who just would take a relatively good job like that, I would assume.
So just to put this up on the screen, so this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is, in fact, from the IRS website. This is irs.gov. Major duties: adhere to the highest standards of conduct, especially in maintaining honesty and integrity. Work a minimum of 50 hours per week, which may include irregular hours. Be on call 24/7, including holidays and weekends. Maintain a level of fitness necessary to effectively respond to life-threatening situations on the job. Carry a firearm and be willing to use $1. Yeah. Carry a firearm and be willing to use deadly force if necessary.
Against taxpayers?
Be willing to and able to participate in arrests, execution of search warrants, and other dangerous assignments. Your IRS.
We're going to start shooting people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I told you there's already a what do you call it? Like a SWAT type detail in the IRS. I have seen them with M16s and vests like police wear that say IRS on them.
Okay.
I mean, that already exists.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah,
I guess
right.
I'm gonna really pay attention to my taxes next year when I'm filing them, though. That's
right.
Well, I gotta say the problem is, and we talked with. Watch our interview this weekend. We have an interview coming up this weekend with accountant to the stars. He's one of the most brilliant tax accountants in the world, Tom Wheelwright. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and please watch that video this weekend when we publish it. Our redacted conversations with Tom. One of the things he talks about is how it's, if you have to, when they come after you and audit you, are you going to try to sue the IRS? It's going to cost you $1 million.
Yeah, he says on average.
On average.
And they don't, if you take a deduction and they say, we don't like it, and you say, but it's allowed, they say, well, we're not going to let you have it unless you take us to court. It's a default, we win unless we go in front of a judge. So here's a fun little would you rather. If an IRS agent has a gun, would you rather duke it out over, let's say, $1,000, or would you rather just take your lashes and let them shoot you in the arm?
Would I
take your lashes?
Would I not have to pay the $1,000?
Yes, this is a one or the other.
Oh, so I could either pay the $1,000, like I'm here to collect the $1,000 that you might not even owe, but we think you do, or get shot.
Yeah.
Probably pay the $1,000.
Well, okay. What if it's $50,000? What's the threshold?
Can I pick where they shoot me?
Yes. Okay. It's like lashes, though. Like, would you take 10 lashes in the public square?
God.
Did you read that tweet?
I mean, for me,
I sent you yesterday about that girl that was fighting, like going back and forth with the IRS for $10,000? $9,000. She was at the mercy of an agent that was ignorant to stocks.
Yes. David, what are you going to say? You take the lashes?
No, Philip was saying.
Or Philip?
Oh, yeah. No, I was going to say my response would be something along the lines of bite me, shoot me. Do it.
Bite me, shoot me.
Go ahead. Take the lashes in the public square and then it's over.